Over the following weeks, the specialist immersed herself quietly into Prince Louis's daily life, observing him across a variety of contexts: grand public ceremonies, private family routines, and even fleeting moments in quiet corners of the palace away from prying eyes. She saw a child who at first glance radiated curiosity and energy, yet whose small gestures often betrayed the weight of constant expectation. A sudden flinch at a loud cheer, a pause in mid-step during a ceremony, a moment of withdrawal during a seemingly ordinary greeting. These were not signs of weakness, but the subtle indicators of a young child absorbing and processing far more than most could imagine. Observers noted a pattern: heightened sensitivity to noise and commotion, visible discomfort in crowded spaces, and moments when overstimulation led to retreat rather than interaction. What stood out was not a disorder, not a diagnosis, but the sheer intensity of the environment itself. Each public appearance demanded composure, energy, and engagement, leaving almost no margin for spontaneous play or quiet reflection. For a child as young as Louis, the expectation to perform, smile, and charm was not just an occasional demand, it was constant. These observations prompted serious, nuanced discussions within the palace. The focus was not to label or stigmatize, but to understand and adapt. How could tradition and ceremony coexist with the emotional needs of a child still learning to navigate his own feelings? How could the royal household provide both exposure to the public and protection from its pressures? The conversations were delicate and ongoing, reflecting the difficult balance between protocol, legacy, and parental instinct. During large-scale public events, the presence of aides became even more intentional. Gentle guidance, quiet reassurance, and strategically timed exits were employed, not as dramatic interventions, but as subtle, nearly invisible measures of protection. To an outside observer, these moments often appeared playful or whimsical, perhaps a child's natural restlessness. To the specialists and family members present, they revealed a carefully choreographed system of support, designed to preserve both the child's well-being and the dignity of the institution. Comparisons with Prince Louis's siblings naturally emerged. Prince George often appeared composed, measured, almost regal in demeanor. Princess Charlotte displayed poise, attentiveness, and grace beyond her years. Louis, in contrast, alternated between bursts of high energy and sudden stillness, a dynamic response to the sensory and emotional demands surrounding him. Experts explain that such differences are not signs of inadequacy or failure, but rather variations in how children process stimulation and cope with public attention. Within the palace, debates were quietly intense. Some aides advocated for fewer public appearances, longer periods of calm, and more time away from structured events. Others stressed continuity, tradition, and the importance of familiar routines for both the child and the institution. Every decision carried weight, not merely in its impact on Louis's experience, but in the precedent it might set for how the royal family navigates the care of its youngest members. Amidst these discussions, discretion remained paramount. The world outside would see only brief glimpses of smiles and waves. The careful orchestration behind the scenes remained invisible. As weeks passed, subtle changes in Prince Louis became apparent. He grew quieter in new or unfamiliar settings, less responsive during rehearsed appearances, and increasingly sought the comfort of private spaces. In private sessions with the specialist, he expressed not fear but exhaustion, a child aware perhaps instinctively of the constant expectation to perform, to charm, to delight, even when he longed for quiet. For the specialist, this marked a pivotal moment. She recognized that while her guidance had been valuable, the environment itself could not yet fully accommodate the adaptations she deemed necessary. Her departure was handled discreetly, following established palace protocol, yet her observations were carefully recorded and circulated among select advisors. The document she produced did not assign blame, issue diagnoses, or predict future outcomes. Instead, it highlighted a pattern: a sensitive child navigating a system built for tradition, not adaptability. It noted the impact of repeated exposure to bright lights, large crowds, and rigid expectations, emphasizing how even small sensory or emotional stresses could accumulate over time. The underlying message was clear: support must come before performance. Visibility, while often equated with strength, is not the same as resilience. Protection, rather than public display, may sometimes be the wiser path. These findings reverberated quietly through the palace. Opinions differed. Some advisors supported adjusting the child's schedule, reducing high-intensity appearances, and allowing greater flexibility. Others, mindful of the monarchy's image, emphasized the importance of consistency, continuity, and public perception. What emerged was not a singular decision, but a subtle recalibration of strategy. Public appearances became more carefully managed, imagery more curated, narratives more thoughtfully framed. The goal was reassurance, projecting calm and composure, while the delicate work of internal adaptation continued largely out of view. Gradually, the public narrative shifted. Prince Louis began appearing in more frequent, yet meticulously framed moments. Smiles in palace gardens, laughter alongside siblings, gentle walks hand in hand with his mother during relaxed family outings, all captured in images that radiated warmth, joy, and a sense of effortless childhood. Yet insiders later revealed that these moments, while seemingly spontaneous, were the result of careful planning. Locations chosen for tranquility, timing orchestrated for ease, and sequences designed to reassure both public and family alike. Media coverage adapted in tandem. Stories softened, headlines emphasized charm and innocence, and attention shifted from speculation to delight. Lingering questions quietly faded beneath these narratives of playful, light-hearted moments. Former staff described subtle, ongoing interventions, gentle cues to redirect attention during visible discomfort, discreet repositioning, and unannounced exits framed as minor schedule adjustments. Nothing dramatic, nothing confrontational. Just quiet, invisible care. Over time, Prince Louis's public presence became selective. Certain engagements were shortened, others avoided entirely. Publicly, these changes were presented as routine adjustments. Privately, they reflected a conscientious strategy to reduce overstimulation and provide the child with more space to grow at his own pace. Tensions naturally arose between continuity and flexibility, between institutional expectation and parental instinct. For Catherine, the struggle was deeply personal, balancing her public duties with her instinct to protect her child. For William, the dual roles of father and future monarch added additional layers of responsibility and consideration. Conversations were careful and deliberate, not about disagreement, but about the implications, costs, and precedents of each choice. Senior advisors approached the situation with long-term perspective, considering the resilience and stability of the institution. Adaptation was quiet, incremental, and never publicized. Decisions were framed as measures of protection, not limitation. Yet beneath the polished public imagery, a profound truth emerged. This was no longer simply about appearances. It was about how a centuries-old institution responds when vulnerability intersects with tradition, and whether care and protection can coexist with expectation. While the cameras captured smiles, real decisions, complex, nuanced, and deeply human, were unfolding out of view. As the weeks turned into months, the specialist's observations became more revealing. She noticed subtle shifts in Prince Louis's behavior that spoke volumes about the pressures of his world. In public settings, he often oscillated between bursts of energy and moments of near invisibility, as if withdrawing into an inner world to regain composure. Loud cheers, sudden flashes of cameras, or the swirl of unfamiliar faces could overwhelm him, prompting a brief retreat that was invisible to most but unmistakable to trained eyes. Even during rehearsed appearances where routines were familiar and scripted, he occasionally hesitated, glancing for reassurance or support. These were not signs of fear. They were the natural responses of a child whose environment demanded constant performance and attentiveness, long before most children learn to navigate the subtleties of public expectation. In private settings, the contrast was stark. Away from the cameras, Prince Louis could relax, laugh without caution, and engage with his siblings in playful abandon. These moments offered glimpses of a child unburdened, a stark reminder of what childhood could look like when freed from the relentless scrutiny of public life. Yet even in these quieter spaces, his caretakers remained mindful, observing, guiding, and ensuring that his world maintained a rhythm conducive to emotional security. It was in this delicate balance between exposure and protection that the true challenge of his upbringing became apparent. The specialist's reports emphasized patterns rather than labels. She highlighted heightened sensitivity to sound, visual stimuli, and social dynamics, noting how overstimulation could quickly lead to withdrawal, even during brief engagements. Her insights were framed as signals for proactive support, fewer high-intensity appearances, carefully structured routines, and the creation of predictable environments where Louis Cowell experienced joy without stress. These recommendations were not about restriction. They were about giving a child agency, space, and the opportunity to develop resilience in a world that offered little margin for error. Within the palace, these observations sparked nuanced discussions. Some aides argued for continuity, stressing the importance of maintaining tradition and public perception. Others advocated for flexibility, urging that Louis's emotional and developmental needs take precedence, even if it meant modifying long-standing protocols. These debates were layered with complexity. Every decision carried implications for the child, for the family, and for the monarchy itself. It was not merely a matter of scheduling. It was a question of philosophy, of how a centuries-old institution reconciles vulnerability with expectation. At public events, the strategy became increasingly refined. Prince Louis was closely guided, a gentle hand on his shoulder, a quiet whisper to redirect attention, a carefully timed withdrawal from the crowd. To the casual observer, these gestures seemed natural, even playful. To those trained in child development, they revealed the invisible choreography required to protect a child while honoring the demands of tradition. Every appearance was meticulously planned, from the timing and location to the sequence of interactions, ensuring that Louis could participate fully without being overwhelmed. The contrast with his siblings became more pronounced over time. Prince George remained composed and assured. Princess Charlotte displayed poise and attentiveness. Louis, in contrast, moved between expressive, high-energy moments and stillness, an intricate dance dictated as much by his temperament as by the environment. Experts emphasized that such differences were normal, reflecting unique thresholds for stimulation and the deeply individual ways children process attention, expectation, and public scrutiny. Even as public appearances continued, private life within the palace adapted. Quiet moments were protected, routines adjusted, and emotional support prioritized. Catherine and William, like many parents, grappled with the tension between duty and instinct, tradition and care. Catherine's concern was particularly acute, as she sought to reconcile the responsibilities of her public role with the instinctive desire to shield her youngest child from undue pressure. William, too, navigated the dual responsibilities of parent and future monarch, balancing long-term institutional considerations with the immediate needs of his child. These personal challenges underscored the human reality behind public perception. Even within the walls of power, parenting required empathy, patience, and adaptability. Amid these careful adjustments, a quiet guiding principle emerged. Visibility is not synonymous with strength. Resilience, particularly for a child growing up under extraordinary pressure, can look very different. It may appear as stillness rather than exuberance, retreat rather than bravado, and subtle, measured engagement rather than public performance. For the palace, the lesson was clear. Protection and support must come before appearance, and the cultivation of well-being is as essential as the maintenance of tradition. Behind the carefully curated images, the reality of palace life was far more complex. Former staff members have since described the quiet, almost invisible work required to ensure Prince Louis's well-being during public events. Subtle interventions, redirecting attention during moments of visible discomfort, repositioning him gently within a crowd, or arranging swift, unannounced exits were routine. These measures were never dramatic or confrontational. They were quiet, precise acts of care designed to allow him to engage with the world without becoming overwhelmed. Over time, these interventions shaped a new rhythm of public participation for the young prince, one that balanced visibility with protection. As Prince Louis's presence became more selective, a pattern emerged. Some engagements were shortened, others avoided altogether. Officially, these changes were presented as minor adjustments to routine schedules, but privately they reflected a growing awareness of the child's limits and an intention to reduce overstimulation. Within the palace, tension simmered between two schools of thought. On one side were advisors committed to consistency, emphasizing that the monarchy's credibility depended on stability, repetition, and continuity. On the other were voices advocating for flexibility, urging that Louis's emotional and developmental needs take precedence, even if that meant adjusting centuries-old protocols. For Catherine and William, this tension was intensely personal. Parenthood collided with protocol, instinct with responsibility. Sources close to the family later described the emotional strain. Catherine, in particular, felt the weight of reconciling public duty with maternal instinct, striving to protect her youngest child without disrupting tradition. William, too, navigated dual roles, father and future monarch, balancing the long-term implications for the institution with the immediate needs of his child. Conversations were not framed as disagreements, but as deliberations over cost, consequence, and precedent, each decision a careful negotiation between care and expectation. Senior figures within the royal structure approached the situation with the lens of institutional longevity. The monarchy, they knew, had always adapted quietly, prioritizing stability over explanation, evolution over spectacle. Discussions remained internal, gradual, and measured. No announcements were made, no public acknowledgement offered. Instead, roles were subtly adjusted, visibility redistributed, and internal strategies recalibrated, all framed as measures of protection rather than limitation. Amid this quiet orchestration, one truth became increasingly clear. This was no longer simply about public appearances. It was about how an ancient institution responds when vulnerability challenges tradition, when the emotional needs of a child intersect with the expectations of an entire nation. Every decision, whether to include Prince Louis in a public ceremony, to curtail an engagement, or to orchestrate a carefully timed appearance, was weighed for its impact not only on the child but on the perception of the monarchy itself. Behind the cameras, a delicate, invisible negotiation was taking place. between duty and care, tradition and flexibility, visibility and protection. Gradually, the public narrative began to transform. Prince Louis's appearances, while more frequent, were increasingly framed as idyllic snapshots of childhood. He was photographed laughing in palace gardens, walking hand in hand with his mother during relaxed outings, or sharing quiet, playful moments with his siblings. These images radiated warmth and joy, offering a sense of effortless childhood that captivated the public imagination. Yet those closest to the palace revealed that these moments were rarely spontaneous. Every location was selected for calm, every movement choreographed for reassurance, and every interaction timed for emotional comfort. The effect was seamless. What appeared natural and joyful to the public was in truth the product of meticulous planning, an invisible safety net woven to allow Prince Louis to engage with the world on his terms. In parallel, the media narrative softened. Coverage highlighted charm, innocence, and playful interactions, shifting attention away from speculation and toward celebration of the young prince's personality. Headlines emphasized delight rather than scrutiny, images conveyed warmth rather than performance. Any lingering questions quietly receded, overshadowed by a broader story of joy, family, and continuity. But inside the palace, the work remained rigorous. Emotional support, careful observation, and strategic intervention continued behind the scenes, ensuring that every public moment aligned with both the child's well-being and the expectations of an institution that moves cautiously, always mindful of history and precedent. As weeks turned into months, the quiet negotiations within the palace began to manifest in the public eye, though subtly. Prince Louis's appearances became carefully calibrated, brief, familiar, and deliberately comforting. The young prince was often photographed smiling amid the serene greenery of palace gardens, laughing with his siblings, or walking hand in hand with his mother during relaxed family outings. These moments radiated warmth, joy, and effortless charm, giving the impression of spontaneous childhood delight. Yet insiders later revealed the intricate orchestration behind every detail. Locations were chosen for tranquility, away from overwhelming crowds or sudden flashes of cameras. Timing was deliberate, with each interaction planned to allow reassurance and minimize stress. Every gesture, smile, and laugh captured for public view was supported by a network of aides, quietly guiding, repositioning, and offering subtle comfort where needed. Media coverage mirrored this careful choreography. Stories leaned into the playful, light-hearted elements of his character, emphasizing charm and innocence. Headlines highlighted cheerful expressions, shared laughter with siblings, and simple joys of family life. Any lingering questions, skepticism, or speculation that had once surfaced gradually receded beneath this narrative of warmth and stability. The curated imagery suggested natural joy, but in reality, it reflected an ongoing strategy designed to balance public perception with the child's well-being. Every image was not only a portrayal of a carefree prince, but also a quiet signal of the palace's understanding. Visibility and safety must coexist. Behind the scenes, internal discussions continued with intensity. Advisors and family members weighed each engagement against two sometimes competing priorities, tradition and protection. Some advocated for continuity, asserting that consistency and routine were essential to maintaining the public's trust in the monarchy. Others pushed for flexibility, emphasizing that emotional and developmental needs could not be subordinated to spectacle, no matter how historic or symbolic the engagement. Within these discussions, the stakes were not abstract, they were deeply personal. Catherine's deliberations, sources suggest, were informed by both maternal instinct and her public responsibilities, striving to honor her child's comfort while upholding her role as a senior member of the royal family. William faced a similar duality, balancing fatherhood with the awareness of long-term institutional expectations. Every decision became a negotiation between the intimate and the public, the emotional and the ceremonial. Senior figures, meanwhile, approached the situation with a lens honed by institutional memory and historical precedent. The monarchy has always adapted, often quietly, ensuring continuity while shielding internal deliberations from public scrutiny. Decisions were therefore subtle, incremental, and intentionally internal. Roles were adjusted, visibility redistributed, and the timing of appearances carefully controlled, all framed to the public as natural or routine, rather than reactive measures. And yet, beneath this controlled presentation, a fundamental challenge remained. This was no longer solely about appearances. It was about how an ancient institution responds when vulnerability surfaces within its ranks, when a child's well-being and developmental needs challenge centuries of established ritual, expectation, and formality. Within the palace, the delicate balance between visibility and protection became an ongoing exercise in judgment and care. Every public smile, every carefully framed family outing, carried with it layers of intention. A laugh captured in the garden was supported by gentle guidance just out of sight. A hand-in-hand stroll along palace grounds reflected calculated planning to ensure comfort and predictability. The world saw joy, innocence, and the effortless charm of a young prince, but inside the walls, these moments were the product of careful orchestration, a constant negotiation between the child's needs and the expectations of history. As internal strategies matured, one truth crystallized for those closest to the family: protection is not opposition to tradition, it is part of sustaining it. By carefully managing exposure, ensuring emotional security, and prioritizing the child's well-being, the palace could uphold continuity while nurturing resilience. Resilience, as they recognized, does not always manifest as outward exuberance or constant engagement. It can take the form of quiet reflection, measured participation, or subtle withdrawal, signals that a child is navigating extraordinary circumstances while still finding ways to adapt, recover, and grow. Even as the public narrative celebrated smiles, laughter, and carefully framed innocence, the palace's internal work continued unabated. Advisors monitored, strategized, and guided. Family members observed, comforted, and protected. Every moment captured for public view was backed by unseen layers of thought, care, and planning. The young prince's world was one of dual realities: visible joy and curated appearances, supported by invisible structures of protection, balance, and sensitivity. And in this duality lay the broader lesson. In a world that often equates visibility with success, true care and resilience sometimes exist in the quiet, measured spaces beyond the cameras, in moments carefully safeguarded from view.